A reading from John's Gospel, chapter 13, beginning to read at verse 31. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I'm with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Today's reading starts with, when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified." This was the Last Supper, and it was Judas who'd just left the room. You know what he's gone to do. Judas, the traitor. Yet somehow, Jesus is aware that this very act of treachery sets in motion the time when his self-giving love can be shown to its fullest extent. We might have thought Jesus' love was shown best through all that he was able to do for other people. His healing, his concern for them, his teaching, his attractive personality. Just being with Jesus must have been a healing experience, at least for some, such as the woman who had the issue of blood, as she discovered. Yet Jesus allows this ultimate demonstration of his love to come about through the act of a traitor. How does that show love? Perhaps it was something about choosing to follow the path of suffering. We all suffer in this life one way or another. We suffer many little pains and many little deaths. At some point, we all suffer that major pain of bereavement, the death of someone we love. Jesus knows what great pain feels like. He's been there. He's experienced it. Perhaps he chose to experience it so that he could share in our pains and sufferings. That is indeed a great self-giving love. And perhaps it was something about submitting to human wishes, even though those wishes were selfish and thoughtless and shallow. "What evil has this man done?" asked Pilate. "I found no crime in him deserving death." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified. It's almost as though Jesus was saying, "You want me dead? All right then, I'll die. If that's what you really want, I'm prepared to give you what you want, whatever it is you're asking for." And through all that terrible time and that terrible experience, he went on loving those who caused him to be executed, and those who executed him, and those who stood by and only watched. And he went on loving all his friends who had deserted him. If that's not love, what is? In today's passage from John chapter 13, Jesus says, "Yet a little while I am with you." And such a little while it was, 3 short years. Maybe the disciples thought it was just going to go on, but it didn't. It was such a little while. And what were they doing during that little while? Well, they were learning to love. Living with Jesus, they were learning to love like Jesus. "A new commandment I give to you," says Jesus, "that you love one another. Even as I have loved you, you must also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And that's what church should be about. Learning to love one another. About not necessarily just being nice to each other all the time, but honestly facing contentious issues together, and yet going on loving each other despite that contention. About allowing people, including ourselves, to try, to explore, to risk, and to make mistakes, and sensitively helping to pick up the pieces afterwards. About bringing problems and difficulties and differences out into the open instead of sweeping them under the carpet and pretending they don't exist. About having the courage to move out of the comfort zone and into those tricky areas of real honesty, because without truth, healing can't really occur. about going the extra mile and constantly pushing the limits of our self-giving, about forgiving and going on forgiving and even coming back for more. You've probably heard the joke, if you find the perfect church, don't join it, you'll only ruin it. And of course there is no perfect church, and that's because there are no perfect Christians. I don't think the world around us is actually looking for perfect Christians or perfect churches. We've learnt to become cynical about things that look too good to be true, and for good reason. They always promise far more than they can ever deliver. But I do think that there is great hunger and great interest in a church where there is great love. A love not demonstrated only in words and slogans, but in attitudes and actions, where we can own and air our difference, where we can disagree, even passionately, and yet still call one another brother, sister, and mean it. Because in such communities, everyone has a place. I do think there is a great hunger and a great interest in a church where there is great love, a love demonstrated by willingness to set aside convenience and comfort so as to serve our communities better. An honest confession here. Best thing I've done in 25 years of ordained ministry is to go on sabbatical. It's true. Without me doing the regular assembly at the local primary school, a wonderful bunch of elderly people from a small congregation with no children decided that they would risk both embarrassment and not a little inconvenience and take up the baton I'd left behind. They found a resource called Open the Book, and with the head teacher's support began leading some assemblies. I'm told it wasn't always a pretty sight. But this small something, given as an act of love, was received as an act of love. The pupils loved it. They thought it was great and they always wanted more. The school was glad, and so it seemed were the parents. But more than that, the people who had offered this gift were changed themselves. They discovered a newfound confidence, and they discovered also a deeper faith. Love began to change things and to change people. When I returned from sabbatical, I found that something had shifted and new opportunities were beginning to emerge. People wanted the church involved in areas of community life that we hadn't reached for decades. Over the next few years, we saw new initiatives develop and new people come to faith and grow in their faith. It didn't start with a plan or a strategy, but with love. Love being found, love being offered, and that, it seems, was enough. That's the sort of love Jesus has for us, and the sort of love he asks us to have for each other. That's the sort of love a loving family, a loving community enables us to learn and to grow in. Perhaps that's why we refer to church sometimes as a family, because the church should provide us with so many opportunities to experience and learn that sort of love. So let's learn it while we can, for like those first disciples, we have such a little while to learn to love one another. Amen.